10, 20, 15, 20.
Once again, we appreciate everybody coming out. If you want to find your seats, we get started here shortly. Everybody want to find their seats, make their way to the front of the building. Once again, you want to grab your drinks and come find a seat. We're ready to get started. I love all this energy. I do. I love it. I love it. I want to be conscious of everybody's time. Thank you. All right. So, allow me to welcome you all to Future History Now. Tonight is a community conversation around inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is a theme of our generation. It's a troubling time that we're in, that we're trying to figure out, and we understand that it's going to take a communal effort in order for us to overcome and make Cincinnati the greatest Cincinnati we all believe in. My name is Bjorn Simmons, and I'm the community catalyst of Startup Cincinnati. Now, what does that mean? This big building that you see here is called Union Hall. It's a co-working space for entrepreneurs, creators, and disruptors. Here, we build businesses, and we really try to change the world. There are 3 different operators in this building: the Brandery, Cincinnati, and Centrifuge. Centrifuge is a resource for entrepreneurs, a membership organization that connects you to customers, also to funding opportunities and help you grow and scale your business. Cincinnati is a fund for tech-based companies to grow and get access to capital in order for them to meet the market demand. And the Brandery is an accelerator program. And if you're not familiar with what an accelerator program is, an incubator of sorts that takes startup businesses to grow. I welcome you all here today because we want to make sure that you all feel like you're a part of Startup Cincinnati. Startup Cincinnati is not just about tech-based companies, it's about entrepreneurs, techies, creators, and hustlers alike that are looking to grow their businesses and also be successful in life. We want you to consider Startup Cincy a hub, and we want you here. So rolling out in March, we'll be doing an open house on Fridays to invite you guys to come out, check out the space, grab some coffee, and work from here. If you're a tech-based company and from around the region, we invite you to look into Centrifuge at centrifuge.com and see if you can be a candidate for membership. If you're a creative in the area, I invite you to reach out to me personally to make sure that we get you accustomed to the area. Now let's talk about tonight. PTSD now started a year ago, and out of the efforts of my good friend Candace Peters. Candace Peters is another entrepreneur in the area. She is a co-founder of Hello Parent, and soon to be, I would say, a big wig in the diversity and inclusion in the area. There are grassroots efforts happening right here in Cincinnati that are here to catalyze the growth and make sure that everybody's a part of this movement that you see happening in the tech world. So without further ado, I invite my friend Candace Peters to the stage to kind of take you guys through the success of Future History Now of today and the Black Founders Network.
All right, good evening, guys. I'm Candace Peters. I'm the founder of the Black Founders Network. I'm here today to share with you who we are, our successes so far, and then how you can connect with us. The Black Founders Network was founded in 2015 to address the goals for increased diversity and inclusion efforts in the Startup Cincy ecosystem. Our goals are to lend support, educate, and inspire current and future women and minority entrepreneurs, to engage more mentors from diverse backgrounds, to attract and retain minority talent incubated in the region, and to elevate the visibility of our community by engaging stakeholders from all parts of the ecosystem. The Black Founders Network meets monthly at various locations throughout OTR and the Downtown Business District, and our meeting times and dates can be found on the Startup Cincy website, and that calendar is powered by Haxton, who went through the Uptech Accelerator. I want to share with you some of our wins this year, and this is just some of the wins from the 50 members of the Black Founders Network. All right, so Listener is a communications protocol that sends data over audio using inaudible sound waves called smart tones. These customizable packets of data can enable proximity data transmission, screen-to-screen functionality, authentication, and lo-fi device-to-device connectivity with any Listener-enabled device. Listener Rodney Williams graced the cover of the May 2016 issue of Black Enterprise magazine and was named the next big thing in tech. Some of his customers last year included the Grammys, including the Cavaliers, and the Indianapolis Colts. But if Rodney were here today, he'd mentioned that he'd still welcome using Listener's technology in Kroger grocery stores across the country. DataZar, the next gentleman, Aman, in the center at the top, operates under the premise that information should be free. It's an open source website that collects and curates data already in the public domain. It's been dubbed the Wikipedia for research, and he was formerly a brand intern who graduated from the University of Cincinnati. He went through the 2016 brand cohort. Candidly, the gentleman at the bottom, Sam Ulu, has been in this ecosystem for a while, and candidly lines up photographers from any event except weddings. Birthday parties, family portraits, Christmas cards. Last year, Sam and his team went through TechStars Accelerator in Austin, Texas. He also relocated there because they noticed through the data that they were collecting that they were getting most of their online business in Austin. They raised money for the Queen City Angels last year as part of a $1 million investment round. Over on the left-hand side, we've got the Honey Jones. So Empower Media Marketing, one of the largest advertising, branding, and marketing firms in Greater Cincinnati, acquired a proclamation that was founded by the Honey Jones of Key Capital. Telemetrics, formerly Black Book HR, and let me skip to my next slide. So that's all the way over on the right. We've got Chris Hall there. They're reinventing, so Telemetrics was formerly Black Book HR. They're reinventing how talent-focused organizations and their employees work together to fuel a culture of high performance. Through their cloud-based platform, they simplify the gathering of employee intelligence and existing organizational data to deliver unique workforce insights in real time. They've recently taken an investment, very recently taken an investment from Jumpstart Inc. in Cleveland The terms have not been released, but it was made from Jumpstart's $10 million focus fund that focuses on minority investments. Some of their customers include the City of Atlanta, Jazz Pharmaceuticals, and Assurex Health. And let's see, Rod Robinson, I'm sorry, that is not the picture of you. You're a very handsome man, you can't see it. So Connexus, founded by Rod Robinson, introduces a cloud-based supplier relationship management platform that streamlines the administration of corporate supplier diversity initiatives. The streamlining allows for small, women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses to ease into connecting to Fortune 2000 corporate buyers. Connexus' first big customers, few customers a few years ago, was McDonald's. They now have over 20 employees, have well over $1 million in revenue yearly, and just closed a $5 million Series A round, led by Techstars Ventures, Serious Change LP, Impact Fund America, and the Social Entrepreneurs Fund. Top in the middle are the gentlemen from MORTAR. They were named to Forbes Top 30 Under 30. And Wiser, the bottom picture there in the center, founded by 3 founders that are not all in the room, but one was Bjorn Simmons, Natasha Mahalo, and Seven Harper. They raised $1.5 million in new capital to help their company grow and expand its product offering. Kinetic Ventures in Covington led the funding round for Wiser, which collects and analyzes data by building technology for consumer feedback. Those are big wins for our team for this year, and back to Bjorn.
So as you can see, there's a lot going on around minority founders here at Tech. And so to really stimulate the night, we've invited some key leaders from across the city, the region of Cincinnati, and even across the state to come here and join us today to tell us a little bit about their efforts in diversity and inclusion. Within the Black Founders Network, that we just the successes that we just celebrated, we found that Cincinnati has become one of the most dense populations of successful minority-led tech companies in the area, in the state of Ohio. So that's a huge win for us. There are a lot of efforts being taking place within this paradigm of entrepreneurship, and so I want to invite my friend Gary Brazil, MORTAR, to come up and introduce our panel that we talk about their organizations, their work in organizations, what they're doing for diversity and inclusion. On this panel, we also have Ashley Young. Ashley Young, the Urban League Professional. We also have Sean Butler of the NAACP Collective. Danielle Curry of Elements. Renita Smiley of Generation Now. And Ulysses John Charles of Venture Program.
I feel like we need a larger round of applause, so swing through yourself. We don't celebrate success enough, so we gotta make sure we celebrate it too.
All right, party people, let's do this.
So the purpose of today's panel is to dig a little deeper into some of the things we've been talking about today and hear about how we can start experiencing diversity and inclusion in real life. So our first question, let's start with Sean. Okay. I was told you start questions at the end, that's why I moved. I thought I was supposed to be over here. So Sean, my bad. So Sean, please tell us, how do you make a case for diversity?
Okay, well, first I want to thank the folks who put this together. And I'm also thankful for this cool t-shirt I did. I got a startup Cincy t-shirt. But I'm gonna just say hi to everybody. I wear a lot of hats. So when you want to make a case for diversity, it depends on what brand you're representing. As far as I'm concerned, whatever I do, I make sure that it's attached to who I am and that I believe in. And diversity is something that I believe brings about a lot of strength in whatever organization you might be representing. So when I'm working for Children's Hospital in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we teach cultural competency because it's important. About 80% of the Children's Hospital workforce is Caucasian. And when you are in a business like that, you really want to create an environment where those who don't represent the majority feel like they can still contribute. Because once you get contributions, that's strength. We make a business case for that, though. So diversity in an organization like Children's, we want to attach it to some value, even though people themselves are our highest, most valuable asset at the hospital. So your people capital. People make and break the lack of talent. If you don't have a lot of talent and diversity of talent, you're not a strong organization. So making a business case for why developing talent rather than losing it. If you lose talent from your workforce, as far as Children's goes, you lose more. It costs the company more money. So we have to make a business case for it. I'm representing the collective tonight from the Cincinnati and the NAACP, and the organization itself always represents and makes a case for diversity. And we do that, again, in attaching it to dollars. The appropriation of resources is something that the organization in total is very focused on. The collective is an ad hoc committee that also makes a case for new leadership. And so again, whether it's diversity as far as ethnicity goes, age, or language, whatever your focus is, it strengthens your organization. But I make a case for it in the, I think a strong case for diversity can be made and what the value is. And most of our companies are focused on that, the bottom line.
Great, thank you.
I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know if I was going next or if you were going next. We both got him from my head. Do you want to do a mix? We can mix it up.
Yeah,
Go
mix it
bar
up
for
a little
bar.
bit. Speaking on myself, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and go if you don't mind, because I was already anticipating going. I already started thinking in my mind what I was going to say. So I was like, I'm going to forget. So how I make my case for diversity is by just treating everyone the same. It's the everyday values that we all forgive, the kind of like superficial images and the way we interact with each other, classes, what race you're from, what college you went to, how you dress. Like if we let all those things go at the door and just treat everyone the same, that's the best way you can make your case for diversity, and not just diversity, inclusion. Because I have come to realize that diversity is great, but inclusion is really the piece that we need to develop in every area, especially in the country and community, everywhere. Because diversity is sitting right here. Like I learned from some documentary that I was watching about diversity and inclusion that Oprah was a part of. And she said that diversity is this, like everybody's dressed different, but we're all the same color. That's not diversity, that's not inclusion. You see what I'm saying? So just because everyone's the same color doesn't mean that we're not diverse. Everyone comes from a diverse, different background. And so it's the education, understanding what diversity means first versus inclusion. Inclusion is you see in everyone in this room, everyone is not African American, everyone's from different backgrounds. So my sole purpose and focus now is inclusion, and that's always been kind of my forefront without actually realizing it, because I kept identifying with diversity as inclusion. And it was my misunderstanding of what the definition of diversity really meant. And so my organization is Generation Now Cincinnati Network. We started with hosting network events. Now we're doing professional development symposiums. By the grace of God, we've been among the faith. We just locked in a partnership with Procter & Gamble, so they're helping build our organization. And we just got into a community grant with Fifth Third Bank, so we'll be opening up an office. And just to kind of make it simple, what we're going to be doing in the future, it's basically going to be an inclusion urban league, And it's basically you can get help at our office with career development, professional development, and business development. We'll be developing our own business development program, which will help young professional entrepreneurs and invest in capital fund for young professionals. And so I don't want to talk too long because I can talk if I want to. So I'm going to let Ashley go.
All right. I actually wanted to respond to something.
Go ahead.
Okay, mix it up, right?
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm representing Venture for America, which is a program that takes entrepreneur-minded recent college graduates and places them in startup communities across the country, which is how I'm here. That's how I make my case for diversity. If Venture for America didn't make the effort to recruit more diverse people, I wouldn't be here to contribute to this community, to the startup space, to the wonderful, amazing POC minds that are up here. Now, when it comes to how I define diversity, I feel like it's a little bit different than how you might have explained it. How you look and what your identity is does matter. Your gender matters, the color of your skin matters, your sexuality, your faith, all of that stuff matters. And that is a part of diversity. So it's one thing to say, hey, let's look at everybody and we are all the same. Don't judge people based on that. Don't take that into consideration. But that's very important because part of me being diverse and bringing value to a community is because of the fact that I experience things differently than you might because of your gender, because of your race.
All right, so my name is Ashley Young, and I'm president of the Urban League Young Professionals here in Cincinnati and Dayton area. And I would say when it comes to diversity and inclusion, for me, it's really about moving beyond the box. So I think you have a lot of people say, oh yeah, we're diverse, we're very inclusive, and you get there and you're like, what the hell? I mean, what kind of environment am I in? So for me, it's really about the action. And it's really about how do we make culture change and how do we really, once we get diversity and once we get inclusion, how do we make sure that the culture supports people being diverse and people being inclusive? And that's hard. It's easier to say that you're these things, but it's harder to actually do those things. And for me also, and here in Cincinnati, we've been doing a lot of talk about equity. And I think that that's an important concept to bring up because when we think about equity and what that means, it's diversity and inclusion and making sure that things are equitable for everyone. So it's not about equality and everybody having the same thing. It's about you providing me with what I need and understanding that everyone is not going to come with the same resources and some people might need additional things. And how do we support them in the things that they need? Because they're not starting from the same place. And so for me, about diversity and inclusion is really moving beyond checking the box and really creating cultures that support diverse people and being inclusive once people get there.
Snacks. My name is Danielle Curry. I am the manager of development and communications at Elements. Elements is a urban youth art center here in Over the Rhine in the corner of Grayson Central. We help to develop young people their creative and artistic aspirations for the future. When it comes to my case for diversity, I'm really proud that Elements, usually I work in the art world, so in the art realm, and Elements is, we have one of the most diverse boards in the art world. And so we're really proud of that. And also, usually my case is also when I'm speaking to funders, I talk about diversity that we have, and we need resources allocated to our young people who would not have the opportunity to be exposed to creative and artistic opportunities if not for Elements. So I usually make that case, and we work really hard as an organization to. Am I doing that? We work really hard as an organization to make sure that we're diverse and that we're inclusive. And one of the things that I've recognized is, to what Ashley said, is when you talk about diversity, people just want African Americans in butts and seats. In the arts world, like just come to my concert, but that's not it. So if you're not diverse in everything that you do, if you're not hiring diversity or African Americans or women of color and you know a broad range of race and religions, and if you're not trying to represent your art for all people and making an American art form versus a very European aristocratic, if you can tell stories, because art is about telling stories, so if you can be diverse in that way, I think that is what the art world needs in Cincinnati. I think that's what Elements brings, and thank you all for having me.
Can I touch on something real quick? I just want to touch on something really quick because we use the word diversity and we use the word inclusion. It's one thing to have seats at the table and like have a Black person, a trans person, a gay person, but inclusion is also about making sure that you're utilizing those people and letting their voices be heard. Because unless you're doing that, all you're doing is tokenizing them and using them as a placeholder. And that's like, come on, you have these people here. You shouldn't be still making these mistakes when you're creating your projects or creating your media where people are outraged online. So that's the other important part about diversity and inclusion is actually listening to the people that you brought into those spaces.
Sorry, time is almost up. Who wants to bring it home?
I was gonna touch on a point that was made earlier, when you said the diversity, which what I was articulating when I meant that is that diversity starts with me and you. We're from two different backgrounds. So just because we're Black doesn't mean that we have the same story. You see what I'm saying? That's diversity. What I meant by inclusion is that inclusion is more important for kids. So we have to make sure to include everyone. But I love the point that you said about making sure if you're including people that the voices need, all voices need to be heard. Don't just fill a room like, well, we need Xing out of Hispanics, we need Xing out of women, we need Xing out of African Americans, but we just need you to sit here. You know, make sure that everyone's heard and everyone's well respected. I believe that's what inclusion should mean. It should start with respect.
I can just close out on wrapping up. And so, like I said, I represent the urban green young professionals. And what we're really trying to do is equip our young professionals with the skills to navigate the working community. And so when we talk about having diversity and being inclusive, so when we get in those rooms, that we speak up and take risks and be bold. And so thank you all for allowing me to speak this evening.
Let's give it kind of one more round of applause. So the purpose of Panel 1 was again to showcase some of the organizations that are really fighting diversity and inclusion. These organizations are highlighting or showcasing our inclusion programming, business development opportunities, and we really appreciate them joining us tonight. Many of them are unfamiliar with the union hall, so if needed, we invite you guys to see my friend Laura in the back, or grab one of the union hall flyers if you'd be interested in working out this space. So thank you again, Urban League, NAACP, Elements, Generation Now, and the Mission for America. Now, moving on, if I can get our screen. So our screen just has a little idle time behind it, so it just went out, but it'll be right back. Well, I also want to be sure to thank Derek Brazil for lending his time to moderate tonight. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Vision has been now started a year ago, and following that event, a study was conducted, and within the study that you all can see now. You can tell I'm a Mac user. There we go. All right. So following officially now 2016, a study was conducted at the University of Ohio, which looked at the performance of venture-backed ethnic minority tech companies across the state of Ohio. This study was conducted by the Catalyst Group and led by former African American Chamber President Sean Worthless. I'd like to invite Sean Worthless to the stage to share his observations from that study. We'll follow up Sean's presentation with panel 2,
right. Is this mic up?
Oh, is this all right? Good evening, everyone. Okay, better than that. Good evening, everyone. All right. My name is Sean Ruggles. I am president and CEO of the Catalyst Group. And, you know, there was one achievement, there was a lot of achievements that we talked about in terms of Black Tech, Black Commerce Network. One of them is actually this study. Several years, about a year ago, a group of individuals sat around and saw a lot of investment happening in this tech innovation space. And they began to explore getting closer to it, but every time they got closer to it, they didn't see people that looked like them. And so the big question was, why? And so being who I am, I always take the question why, and I try to figure out why. And that led to a conversation that we'll have tonight. So actually, first of all, I want to invite you to be part of our study. Although I'll share some learnings tonight in terms of how to answer that question, what's happening, we'll also need your input and your engagement throughout the evening to be able to continue the journey on this. So what we have right now is what's called the Minority Entrepreneur Connectivity Assessment. That's launched last year. In terms of what Catalyst does, we develop a platform and we design engagements that move brands and organizations to connect with their intended audience. Tonight, our intended audience is minorities in tech. And so what we've done here is we're taking a look at kind of what's going on. We have 4 parts of our journey in my conversation with you that I'll get through in less than 15 minutes. So we'll be quick. First piece is we look at what we assess and why. We'll pick up on some of the conversations we just had in terms of diversity, the difference between diversity and inclusion. We're going to talk about paradox. Paradox is something that you think you understand, but once you delve into it, it looks a little different, it feels a little different to you. And then we'll end on what the opportunity is. How many people here are familiar with Ohio Third Frontier? Okay, that's good. Ohio Third Frontier is a funding initiative. It's a renewable tax in the state of Ohio, and it generates about $2.1 billion per year in tax money. $2.1 billion in tax money. And it goes to fund the things that we have here, technology-based products, attract companies, grow industries and jobs. And so when we start thinking about that, part of the funding comes down to what we have, what's called an entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? And so this building, the brands are in this building, the organizations in this building are Third Frontier partners. And so there's healthy investment, and once Third Frontier invests, it's a catalytic piece when other people start to invest in the cities and private foundations. And so, why is that important? Well, the mission of Third Frontier is to drive entrepreneurship statewide. In order to do that, we've got to make sure that all sectors of entrepreneurs are included in that work. Here's why it's important. Brookings had a finding study that said there's a shift to majority minority populations in the U.S. that's happening faster than anybody expected. Are you familiar with the term majority minority as a census tool? Basically, what that means is any geographic region in which its ethnic population reaches over 50% is labeled majority minority. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, there was only 4 states, and these were the states that were listed that were majority minority. At that time, there was also then a growth in terms of the percentage of non-Hispanic white residents at far below 60% in another 5 or 6 states. If you look at the 40 largest metropolitan areas in America, what you'll find is that they're majority minority, and 13 of them have seen 40 of them have seen the white population drop below 60%. And so the idea that America is getting more diverse is a real notion, because this information is 4 years old. Right now, we have 9 states that are majority minority. Now, we have over 20 cities in America. Majority minority. And so we start to think about economic inclusion or inclusiveness of the ecosystem, it becomes a regional priority, primarily because the fact has a direct impact on the viability of our regions. So when we think about this, 1 out of 2 metropolitan residents in Cincinnati is an ethnic minority. You can't say that we're going to talk about an economically viable region without having a conversation about how do you rise and increase that segment, where does that participation comes in. And so it becomes an economic imperative. So here's what we look at.
Just a little bit of education on how it happens. There's this platform in the Ohio Third Frontier called the Entrepreneurial Service Provider Network. That basically means that they've divvied up the state in 5 regions. Each of them has what's called an ESP leader. And they have a network of incubators and accelerators that report into them. Does that make sense? So it's a hub, right? And there's 5 cities. I won't go through all 5 cities, but Cincinnati hub sits right in this building, it's Cincinnati. Okay, we got the granary, we got centrifuge, we got everything that's inside Cincinnati coming into this building and then reported up to the state, 5 regions. The ecosystem, we use that term a lot, and when we started to do the study, we found out that people didn't know what it was. The ecosystem is basically a collection of services that an entrepreneur can see themselves in the middle, and the way they get to the services is through connections and relationships. And so some of the services are mentorship, co-working space, internal branding, seed money, business development opportunity, demo days, intellectual partnerships. All those things are services that you're entitled to as part of the ecosystem. So this is how we define it. And when we look at this nationally, we actually find that Ohio has one of the most robust ecosystems in the entire country, particularly for the Midwest. And you think about the connectors that we have in Southwest Ohio, which is Cincinnati, by far we're a lot more connected and we're a lot more together. So that becomes a competitive advantage, so we're doing something right. But here's our statement. But finally, when we look at the data, says that Ohio's entrepreneurial ecosystem is diverse, but it's not inclusive. So I love the notion that was talked about before, which is there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. I sum it up as diversity is an invitation and the acceptance of who you are. Inclusion is whether or not we have a transaction we can do some things. Does that make sense? So if we're entrepreneurs, we're not here primarily just to spend time and get to know each other. We're here to get a deal. We're here to scale our ideas. And so we have an ecosystem that has one of the most robust offerings in the entire Midwest. We're not as inclusive, and I would probably say as we would like to be. It's not because we don't have the intent. It's just the fact that we live in an era in terms of what gets measured, gets done. And believe it or not, we really haven't had the conversation really measured what inclusion looks like in our tech and innovation space. So here's what we did. There were some key indicators. Let me tell you who the partners were. The partners that helped us with the study were Ernst & Young, EY. We also had help from UC and Chris here. We actually sat down with the Black Founders Network. Information that you see comes from them, as well as a group, along with some public information requests from the state and some other pieces. Okay, so here's what the key indicators. Key indicators were ethnic minority inclusion results are routinely inflated or overstated. So when we do measure, right, the measure and the outcome and the result is much higher than it actually is. The second indicator we have is that entrepreneurs are significantly underdeveloped with deal flow that precede investment, those transactions. And while we have some successes, we have too few episodes of successes in tech. We want to get more. And the last piece is that the opportunity is a big opportunity for more market-rated, capital-rated ethnic firms in the ecosystem. Okay? So what tells us that? Well, if we do this right, what we have an opportunity to do is address recruitment, address incubation, talk about capital readiness, and we'll talk about commitment that should be made with all of our ecosystem partners, which are corporations. So, what is the information that led us to these conclusions? First is, when we look at outreach and engagement, we find that outreach levels vary widely. So this are the 5 ecosystem partners. Red one is out of Columbus, Cincinnati is our ecosystem here in Cincinnati. Jumpstart is Cleveland, Rock Ventures is Toledo, and Tech Growth is Athens, right? The first line that says qualified deals is actually events like this. The outreach that happens with ecosystem partners. And you can see that in Southwest Ohio, we actually lead the rest of the state in terms of engagement. When we talk about minority-led, folks that did attend those events and are engaged, we still see very high numbers here within our region. 40% of those folks that are engaged in events like this, then are matched and actually move on to receive an invitation to join. So that's very impressive. That's almost 1 out of 2 people that are engaged initially on the ESP platform get invited to there's a match between their needs and what the provider provides. But the inclusive outcomes are inflated. Here's what we mean. If you look at the minority on the number that's on top, it says minority on the left. Let's say for Rev 1 in Columbus, 240 firms they reached. But if you add up the number of African Americans, Hispanics, Indians, and Asians, that number does not equal 240. Does that make sense? Which means that on average, this bottom number here is that the inclusion numbers that are reported are inflated by anywhere from 60% on average to up to 90%. Does everybody get that? Understand that math? Okay. So it's not the fact that outreach isn't happening. It's not the fact that we're not engaged. 40% of the people that are engaged move on, which is great. But we overestimate how many people are actually in the system. And that's because we have the opportunity to borrow from best practices, which is there's a measurement hierarchy. Inclusion and diverse initiatives were created to address economic disparities. And so what ends up happening is we have to prioritize populations with the greatest economic disparities first, and then subsequently we move on to other groups. So this is why whenever you hear information reported, it's minority and women, but not minority plus women in the same number. And the reason is if you start to add things together, what you end up getting is the fact that it begins to dilute its original intent. If our original intent was to impact ethnic minority growth or entrepreneurship, but our numbers are lost in a bigger number that isn't segregated and separate for us to see what we're doing, we don't know if our efforts are actually reaching them. Does that make sense? So we have a bundling of numbers, but then we also then have some businesses being counted twice. That's what the information is saying. So if you are a woman that owns a business, happens to be African American, and lives in Athens, you might be counted 3 times in the state of Ohio. Because you are African American, you're a woman, and you're in a rural community. And so the challenge that we have is that inflated numbers reduce the generation of new opportunities that go towards minorities, because people will see and feel as if they've reached their goal, and therefore the effort will be pulled back because we've done a good job. Does that make sense? Right? Not accusatory, it's just the fact that the discipline just hasn't followed the investment. The other number, these are deals. And so this period runs from January of 2015 to the latest quarter reported, which is September 2016. And what we find is deal flow is low, particularly among ethnic minorities. Ethnic minorities make up, on average, about 16% of the clients that are in ESP, those who get the invitations to accept and become parts of their programs, right? But receive about 2% of all pre-seed investors. So if you look at, as an example, Jumpstart, which is probably best in class in terms of just the numbers of people that are engaged, what you start to see is the fact that while there's minorities in the pipeline, right, when it comes down to pre-seed investment, they're underrepresented. So what I call, when I was at P&G, we call it a fair share calculation. So if we are 15% of the universe, then what we want to do is receive 15% of whatever outcome we're talking about, right? And so there's an opportunity there that we have to take a look and say, okay, well, we represent a larger part of the universe than the deal for that we're getting. Not accusatory, it's just saying that we're now just starting to look at that, and there's the opportunity to grow. But for those firms that, those ESP partners who do have minority firms, the pre-seed investment makes up about 3 or 4% of the deals that they actually do. And then more than half, 3 of the reported ESP partners have no minority deals at all. Right? Could be rural communities, could be a number of things, right? And so what we need to happen at this stage is we need more seed investors. We need more angel and seed groups and VCs to take not just risk, but really start to work with our community. But we have to stress the importance of making sure that an incubation readiness training generates the investment that everybody's interested in. All right. So here's the paradox. The interesting part is we don't have a shortage of businesses. We don't have a shortage of ideas. As a matter of fact, if I just look at the African American segment alone, not saying that other minority segments don't matter, just pulling data. Census that came out earlier this year or last year, 2.6 million African American firms were in the last census. That's a 44% increase versus the previous census. We were the fastest growing business segments in the entire country. And if we localize that in terms of Cincinnati, what we see is we have close to 15,000 firms that generate $1 billion in sales. But the paradox comes in is that if you have all the receipts of a lot of our firms, they make less than 1% of the GDP. And what that means is that now we used to talk about it as a scale problem, but what we have is what's called the powerful 4%. If I took that $1 billion and I split it up to firms that have more than one employee, those firms actually make up about 2/3 of what we see. Which means that once we get on, we're on. But the challenge is that there's not that many of us. So I'm just saying at the end of the day is that the opportunity is there, right? But our pool is small as it relates to businesses. Now, this is non-tech. If you get to tech, that pool even gets a little small, right? Because what we have is minority proximity to the tech sector is pretty low. So if you look at technology partners like Google, take a look at Facebook, Intel, a lot of them have a lack of diversity in terms of their workforce. But then also there's a low proximity in terms of them working with some of the entrepreneur communities to be able to get to exposure to ideas and capabilities. And there was a study that we talked about last year in the building that about 5% of venture capital investment is made in minority firm segment, and that's a national number. So actually, when you look at what the Black Founder Network talked about earlier, they talk about the successes and deals that were actually done within the network, you'll find that Cincinnati actually has a lot of traction. We have a lot of great ideas. We have a lot of great firms. As BK said, we have one of the strongest pieces of density in terms of entrepreneurs in our market. And so what we want to do is make sure that we continue to identify firms, both locally and regionally, invite them here to be able to take advantage of what's going on. So here's a couple of things that I'll end on as it relates to some nuances in terms of entrepreneurship. These insights came up during the focus groups that were done. And the key question here is, we're going to chase that dream and chase that idea, but at what cost? One of the nuances around ethnic startups is the fact that startup capital is a hurdle. And that actually comes back from our wage gap, which is, on average, the average African American household has about $8,000 to $7,000 worth of household income, whereas their majority counterparts are starting with a larger base. And so when we start to talk about starting a business, a lot of the dialogue and framework goes to income replacement versus wealth generation. And the differences are this. If we arrive, and this is the platform to get into the deal, we're arriving, another paradox, we're arriving, we've got to make sure that we're ready to attract the deal. We have to have propositions that have market intelligence and industry validation. But here's the challenge that we have. If you're a minority business in the state of Ohio, or if you're a minority business almost anywhere, what you'll find is a lot of the development services for ethnic minorities geared towards what are called organic transaction broking contracts. Right? And that means that that's about getting money now. When we start to talk about the ecosystem, it's about disruptive commercialization that scale ideas. The focus is on marketing capital readiness to attract those deals, but that money comes a little later. And so as we start to develop strategies to get more inclusion in the pipeline of entrepreneurs, what we want is to make sure when you walk in, that you understand that we understand this mindset and make sure we build propositions for that. And the last piece I'll share with you is that in the stages of getting to the deal, it's having some level of foundation, some capabilities, some capacity that we show. You get to a certain level, and then that's where the deal validation happens. And if your deal doesn't get validated, you go back in and work on your deal, and then you go on up. There's one strategy that actually works out very well, which is called tech-enabled. So we can't have a strategy of pure tech. What we then can do is expand the pipeline by taking businesses right now that have a core proposition to give them the technology backbone. That's an excellent way in which we can then move people up into stronger deal flow. And then now people are walking with experience within their category. Right? And then lastly, one of the key pieces here is developing trust in relationships. So this entire model is based upon some level of membership, mentorship, and advocacy. Folks, real quickly, simply, individuals are looking for folks who are culturally competent and they can express their ideas and they understand the nuances of what it means to start a minority African American company. So moving forward, what does this mean? Based on the data, when we talk about that we're diverse, but not inclusive, or not inclusive yet, we saw a couple of opportunities. First, it was an opportunity to get a standardization measure. Looking at it is not to be accusatory or punishing. That's not the intent. The intent is to make sure that we develop a platform or benchmark from which to grow from, right? And so what we want to do then is draw from national standards so how we account for inclusion. Second piece is recruiting and identifying business. We have an opportunity for incubation. And then instead of traditional minority business development training, we're looking at capital and market readiness. So here's what the opportunity is. And I think it's a lot of discussion that we'll end up with today is simply this. Right now, Ohio Third Frontier has released an inclusion strategy in which ESPs, which are service providers, can spend up to 10% of their budget on inclusion initiatives. And so there's two strategies that they have. One, allowing 10% to spend on initiatives like this, and then doing some customization to the program. And the other opportunity we have is that we can now work with traditional minority businesses and get them a tech back. They then would be eligible for the same level of service that we can offer. So at the end of the day, I want to thank you for your time, but it starts with us. The statement simply is the fact that we are a very diverse entrepreneurial community. Southwest Ohio is probably doing a really good job in minority business development and area entrepreneurship. Jumpstart out of Cleveland is probably the best in class around inclusion programming. And so we do have a right to win in the state of Ohio. But what we want to do now is to say, now that we have the measurements in place, how can we go from here? So again, thank you for your time and your patience, and we can answer questions and answers. Thank you.
Last year, when we had the first feature history now, it was born out of a feeling that we had throughout the Black Founders Network. But now here we are, we validated those feelings of where we were, and now we have really hard data. So, and now we move on. So I'd like to welcome up our next panel that I'm going to moderate, and it is about the state of Ohio. It's diverse but not inclusive. Leaders from across our state are going to discuss the state of African American success and what this state means to them. Let me welcome up Mitchell Phelps from the University of Cincinnati, student body president, Sean Parker from Fifth Third, Rob Robinson, the CEO of Texas, Greg Ridley, the CEO of Blacks in Technology, Gloria Ware, principal of Inclusion Jumpstart Ohio, and Darren Regas, the president.
Show the chair.
All right, so what I'd like to do is go across the panel and have you explain what your role is currently, and then how is to the information that you heard this meeting. So Darren, you are currently the president of the Minority Business Accelerator. hearing this information, tell me a little bit about what you do currently, and what you feel we can do to move forward based on what we learned this evening.
Thank you. So my name again is Darren Reedus. I lead the Minority Business Accelerator, which is an initiative out of the Cincinnati, USA Regional Chamber. It particularly focuses on quote-unquote larger scale African American and Hispanic firms. We define larger scale as businesses with at least $1 million in annual sales. Today, it's a portfolio of 36 companies that in aggregate, those 36 companies do just over $1 billion in annual sales and have created about 3,500 jobs since the program was created back in 2003. Actually, one of the primary initiatives created after the unrest here back in 2001. So my first reaction, I guess, to the presentation, I thought it was very well done. Sean's done a terrific job in putting that together. There's so much that I want to kind of get into from the Q&A standpoint because, details matter. When we talk about angel investment, we talk about venture capital, a lot of, terms get tossed around that you can easily miss. As an example, I'll throw one out. Sometimes entrepreneurs are denied because business isn't venturable. Don't even know what that means. And so often what happens is, particularly for early stage seed investors, they have to kind of invest with an eye towards, can we as a seed investor raise institutional venture capital money to follow us on, because the seed money is only enough to get it maybe a few yards down the field. And so if they don't feel like they can raise additional institutional money, you may be denied when you have a very good idea. There's a difference between a venturable idea and an idea that can raise private equity capital. So details are important. We'll get into some of that. But I think overall, conceptually, Sean did a terrific job kind of laying out kind of opportunities and challenges.
I'm going to let Mitchell Phelps go next. If you can share what your major is currently at the University of Cincinnati. And we saw in the data that we have lots of people who come into the ecosystem, but don't necessarily make it all the way through into the pipeline to become venture capital. What do you think can be done at the University of Cincinnati to prepare more students to come in and enter this tech ecosystem?
Thank you all very much for letting me sit here with all distinguished individuals and really be able to speak from a student perspective. At the University of Cincinnati, I'm a current fourth year. I'm out of 5 in city marketing, international business, and entrepreneurship. But first, I'm really interested in the space and the whole startup culture. And I think number one and the biggest thing is truly education for young people about specifically how you get into the startup culture and world. I know going to college and growing up in my family, I didn't really know that I had the opportunity to start a business. And I think that's like watching many of my peers. Our parents kind of teach us to go to college and start work and make money so we can continue on the legacy that they've laid the foundation for us. But really, since I've been in college, really able to individuals like Chris Jones, which opens opportunities and is really educating us daily, especially minorities in the college business, of the opportunities to have startup businesses and the resources that are out there for us. A lot of students don't know about these resources. I'm learning even more even today about the resources that we have. Building that confidence in order to kind of take that leap of faith and start a business and take that risk as well.
All right, Sean, you are up next. So one of the recommendations given was that there should be a larger commitment from corporations, philanthropic organizations throughout town. What do you think that you can do as an organization and really even as an individual to move our ecosystem and the state forward?
That's a good question. So my name is Sean Parker. I'm the PR director, public relations director at Fifth Third Bank. And, I think that it's all about access to information and building relationships. So if I look around the room, There are, a bunch of folks in here that I've known for a really long time that we're constantly sharing information that we've heard that may be helpful to the other one, or sometimes we're just, belly aching about our current struggle, and hopefully the other person is at a higher level so they can kind of pick us up, right? But it's really important. But what I would say is there are a lot of opportunities that are out there, but it ultimately comes down to your network and sharing that and having access to that information. And once you get the information, it's having a group of advisors or mentors that can tell you when your idea is good or when it's terrible, and to help you, out of love, to help you grow. At Fifth Third, we're doing a lot in the fintech investment space, and so for people that know me and that know I'm working in that area directly, but I do all of the communications for it. But I have a upfront view of what the bank is looking for in terms of investments in certain groups. And so that's the other piece, is not building something and hoping that others will come, but it's having access to what the opportunities are, and then building something that actually meets that need. And again, it comes from having access to that information. The last part that I'll say, because John Moore's here, and this is something that we talk about all the time, which is the power of the vouch. And so if I'm in a position, and Sean and I used to do this all the time as well. If I'm in a position to help make a decision, then when I'm in that room, I need to vouch for Sean or vouch for John or for others, and kind of pick up where they may fall short in their presentation. Others do that when they have a relationship. We don't do it as much because it's rare that we're in the room that we have the opportunity to vouch and help with that. So it's a couple of thoughts, and it's all really good information. And if I was in a position to want to grow an idea, I would get on Sean's calendar and get access to all the background research, to the research to help inform those decisions. So.
Awesome. So the power of the vouch, I like that. And I'm going to put the next question to you, Rod. So, Rod, you have a very powerful company here in Cincinnati. You've grown it from, that first customer, now, raising a lot more venture funding than most, while also making revenue. So it's not just about getting the seed investment, it's about actually doing the work and making revenue and having customers. So kudos to you. If you could, though, tell me a little bit about your reaction, and then also a bit about how you use your voice to vouch for others.
Sure. So again, I'm Rod Robinson, founder and CEO of Nexus. We're a supplier management platform, software company, and we enable large global corporations to build more inclusive, transparent, and compliant supply chains or supplier networks. And so it's interesting as I look out today, and I had the pleasure of speaking at an event a couple weeks ago, and people said, "Hey, you started your company at a time when a lot of the startup sensing infrastructure didn't even exist." So it's interesting to get your perspective, and I was asked, how would that have changed if you had those resources available? And it's interesting because I feel like while the formal resources weren't available, there were still the same people around. And so when I look at Sean's output today, what really stands out to me is what he said about trust, and that really kind of flows into relationships. And I'll say it, you'll hear me say this over and over again. It is so important to establish relationships before you need money, before you need revenue. Relationships. I wasn't even thinking about raising venture money, and because I was sharing my idea with someone that works here at Cincinnati, and our kids play soccer together, and he said, you need to pursue venture funding for this. If you do this, this, and this, you make a couple of tweaks, this will be, venture backable. So I think it's so important to, first of all, paint a picture. If you have a vision, if you have a dream, sketch it out like I did. I drew it out on a napkin. This is what I think the perfect solution would be. And I drew it out on a napkin, and then I figured out what resources I needed to get it. I didn't have all the expertise. I didn't have all the answers. I had never raised venture. I had great business background, education, but I had never gone down the venture capital path. But it was so important to let one great relationship lead to another relationship, and to another relationship, and to another relationship. And before you know it, you have people throwing money at you. And that literally happened. Now, the roller coaster ride is scary, and there was a lot of tough times. Having to go home and basically tell my wife that not only are we not getting a paycheck, but we're gonna have to lend the company some money. Even though we don't have a whole lot, we gotta lend the company some money to make payroll. So, as I look at Sean's data, because he called me and we talked about it for a bit, and he interviewed me for a while. But I think that we have to. I feel when you ask me about my voice and how I use that, I love sharing my story, because I feel like every time I share my story in an environment, I'm able to touch someone who's kind of at a certain point or at a place where I was, and invariably they come up to me and say, "Man, I thought I was the only one going through that." So I think it's important to have success stories, even if you haven't, quote unquote, made it all the way to the finish line. Every step of the way makes a difference, and so that's really, my perspective. I wasn't surprised by the data, but I think there's a lot of things that we can do to help around mentoring and using your voice and just sharing the simplest things. It will make a difference.
Right, so I'm gonna go to Gregory next, because you're talking about sharing stories. And I've also heard, both from Mitchell and Sean, that there needs to be access and awareness. So Greg, tell us what you do and what your initial reactions are from the study.
My name is Greg Greenlee. I'm an engineer, and I'm also the founder of the Black Technology Organization. We're a tech-focused community and media organization, and we focus on telling stories of Black men and women, Black men and women in tech who are doing amazing things. We have a community of over 2,000 plus members across the nation, even some in the UK, some out of Africa. And so a lot of what we do is community building, but also on the media side, we interview, we feature and spotlight the men and women that are doing great things in tech. And so the thing, one of the biggest things is telling our stories and giving a positive representation of who we are in tech as engineers and as entrepreneurs. And I'm sorry, what was
That's exactly.
Oh, okay. And so, what we're, our main goal, I always talk about the three main pillars of what Black technology represents, and it's to increase visibility, increase participation, and change perceptions. And when I talk about change perceptions, I mean from the inside and the outside, because within our community, when you hear about someone being a tech entrepreneur or an engineer, the first thing people think of is a white male. And so if we have a positive representation through media, because, it's media outlet there is, and so there's no reason why we should be taking advantage of the media to tell our stories and to have these positive images. And so, at Black Technology, we try to maintain as positive images of Black men and women in technology.
So we heard several times this evening that Jumpstart has the gold standard for the best diversity and inclusion efforts in the state of Ohio. So we have Gloria Ware here, and I waited until last for you because I noticed you have a full page of notes. And also, you guys are fantastic at what you do. And hearing the study and seeing, or hearing the recommendations, standardization of metrics, recruitment, incubation of more talent, access to capital and larger commitments from others. Tell me what you do at Jumpstart and your reaction to those things. And after that, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions.
So thank you for inviting me to be here. It's happy to be here in Cincinnati tonight. Jumpstart, we're one of the ESPs that was referenced on in the PowerPoint. That was my first time seeing the data. I'm the principal of inclusion at Jumpstart, and my job is to make sure that those numbers look good. And that we're doing the work. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I picked up from the legacy of my good friend Darren here, who was my predecessor and is now doing this work in Cincinnati. The thing that's unique about Jumpstart is, number one, just kind of we represent 21 counties in Northeast Ohio, so we have a number of rural communities that we serve, but we also have 5 major urban areas. So Cleveland, Akron, Canton, it's kind of the area that serves a lot of the urban areas that we represent. We have a very diverse population. So first of all, I'm very excited to see that someone is aggregating this information and sharing it and slicing and dicing it. Data tells provides a lot of great information and helps to create momentum. So kudos to Sean for putting that information together. So there's a number of things that we've been doing in Jumpstart. We're a nonprofit organization. We invest in entrepreneurs. Our mission is to unlock the full potential of diverse and ambitious entrepreneurs with the goal of transforming entire communities. And that was, we've had a couple of mission statements over our 13-year history. That's our most recent version. And in the past, we've had a history of focusing exclusively on tech. But we realized that working with diverse entrepreneurs does not just mean diverse by what you can see, but types of entrepreneurs. So we're also now working with non-tech entrepreneurs. So there's a couple of things, but I think it all starts at the top. First with the senior leadership, and that includes the boards who your senior leadership works with. Our CEO, Ray Leach, has recruited a very diverse board. And is diverse from the perspective of gender diverse, racially diverse, diverse industries, and that makes a huge difference. A board, these are entrepreneurs, these are tech entrepreneurs, these are some very successful scale-up or gazelle-type entrepreneurs, but they're also people that are very passionate about the community, they're very passionate about this work and this mission. They put the time in, they put the work in to making sure that the work that we do is excellent work. We've got subject matter expert on our board. We have someone who is, she leads talent and diversity and inclusion for American Greeting. She co-chairs our inclusion committee. So that is huge. And I think with all of these nonprofits, that is the key, making sure that you've got that diverse representation that is going to do the work to make sure that things are happening. So having a diverse board also leads to a diverse network. So a lot of us talked about I didn't realize that there was this thing called tech entrepreneurship. I didn't know VCs. I don't know any diverse entrepreneurs. Where do you find them? If you have a diverse board, that makes that job a lot easier. Something else that we've done, I think that's also important, is one of the young people mentions diversity and inclusion not being a checkbox activity. So diversity and inclusion is aligned with our business sustainability. So we make it very clear that this is not a checkbox activity. If we do this work around diversity and inclusion, we're going to get more deal flow. Entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of our organization. That's how we survive. We'll get more deal flow. We'll have more talent interested in working for a startup, which is always a big challenge, trying to convince someone to not work for a large corporation where there's a fat salary and nice benefits, and to work for companies like the Nexus, which will be that large corporation one day. So making it something that customers want. So more and more vendors are interested, seeing the numbers are more interested in this. So we are very clear about making sure that this work that we do helps Jumpstart to achieve its goals. Thanks, someone mentioned that. Addressing the issue around access to capital. So, Sean mentioned that 5% of all VC deals have been with African American companies. Actually, the numbers I've raised is less than 1%. One of the things that we did to address that issue is to raise, in partnership with the state of Ohio, a fund specifically for women and African American and Latino tech entrepreneurs or tech-enabled entrepreneurs called the Focus Fund. It's a $10 million fund that makes investments of up to $700,000 in high growth, venture-able companies. So that is kind of putting your money where your mouth is very important. And the goal is to demonstrate that this fund is going to generate real high returns with the goal being that other VCs across the country will see this. And then lastly, one of the things that we've done recently, Sean talked about this 10% that these ESPs have to use towards diversity and inclusion efforts, is that we launched in partnership with one of our funders in Cleveland, the Cleveland Foundation, an initiative called Core City Cleveland, which has been very grassroots. So it's all about going into the community, particularly, the most stressed, economically distressed communities, going to city council meetings, going to community organizations, community leaders, finding entrepreneurs, and then literally pulling them into the ecosystem. But also working internally with your staff to make sure that your staff is culturally competent. And when those people come in, a lot of times they're very nervous and very anxious about, coming to a place like this. Making sure that they feel welcome and they're getting the same high quality level of service that any other entrepreneur is doing. And we're even slicing and dicing, service. So we survey all of our clients and we're breaking the customer satisfaction scores down by gender and race to make sure that, because we learned about unconscious bias and we want to make sure that if there's any issues that we address those. So whatever we can do to try to address that, we try to establish the best practices in this work, but at the level that we can as a nonprofit. That's what we're doing because we have a lot of people at Jumpstart that are very passionate about this work. Our employees are very passionate about it, and we'll hold us accountable as we do have leadership at the top that also holds us accountable as well too. So that makes a huge difference.
Thank you very much. So we want to open it up to audience questions. Is there anyone out there that has one? If not, I can always come up with one more. Let's say unless you want to shout it out. I know you have a big voice. Go ahead.
Okay. So I hear a lot about tech and creating spaces for Black people in tech, minorities in tech. But what do you do when you're starting a product that isn't tech oriented? It's not a SaaS platform. Where do you go and who do you talk to then?
MORTAR. MORTAR.
There you go.
And Williams in the back. I don't know if Derek's still here. I think it's all about, again, it's all about the access to information and network. So tech is hot right now, and so there's a lot of attention that's put in that, given in that kind of area. But it's the same principles apply. So Rod said earlier that these a lot of these incubators and programs didn't exist when he was starting this company, but he built, he had relationships that he could lean on, and those relationships then turn into others. So the incubators, these programs are only one aspect of it. The big piece is putting yourself in a position where you're going to meet folks that can help you build and grow and develop your idea into something further.
Can I add on? So I would like to say that most companies nowadays, if not all of them, are tech companies. Tech is used to enable these companies to grow their businesses. So the big community is a perfect place for collective knowledge. So if you're looking for information about, how to take, your idea to an MVP, we have a ton of people who are not only engineers and developers, but they're also entrepreneurs, and they have been through this process. So I always talk about, the community being a great place because we share knowledge, we share information. So, join the BIT network. It's free to join, blackstechnology.net. But, to me, all companies, if you're not employing some type of tech, then you probably should be.
Can I expand?
Yes, please.
So my company's called Health. We create dolls and storybooks that teach natural characters to young girls and women. It's actual physical product. So I'm not a tech company. And we're talking about diversity and inclusion in terms of people, in terms of identity. But I think that we also have to consider the fact that the design and art should also be included. So it shouldn't be just STEM, but it should be STEAM. Because if I'm an entrepreneur of color, if I'm a minority, I'm creating a physical product, I shouldn't be excluded because we're focusing solely on promoting diversity in tech spaces.
So I'm not referring to your actual product being tech-based. I'm referring to you employing tech in order to help grow your company. Does that make sense? So, whether or not that's having a website or some type of, back-end system that you use to sell your product. Most companies nowadays are using technology in order to sell their product, whether it's a physical product or it's a software-based product.
Gloria, can you kind of address that for a moment and how you kind of deal with the culture piece and art and design in Cleveland?
Yeah, so really the answer to that question was when I first started at Jumpstart, our strategy was to work with National Society of Black Engineers or Society of Hispanic Engineers, Black MBA. So we're trying to be laser focused in finding those tech entrepreneurs. But since we launched Core City, we're just like, hey, you are not even an entrepreneur yet. We have 10 ideas and we need help narrowing it down to one and then figuring out your key tasks. We found that we have, by opening up the door of opportunity, we have been able to take a lot of the same principles that we use with our tech entrepreneurs and help to successfully grow in companies that you just described. So one of our Core City clients is a young woman. She's a public health professional during the day, but she has a line of dolls that have kind of alternative stories, that are more ready for today's society. And we're working with her to find the same principles that we do in helping her move her business forward that we do with tech entrepreneurs. But what we do find is that what happens is throughout the process, they ultimately identify, there's a technological way for me to get my product on the market or for me to interface with digitally minded kids. So, but I think to your point, you gotta meet entrepreneurs where they are and, pull what you can from them and they connect with other entrepreneurs and learn and grow. And as a result, we've seen people kind of convert their businesses to tech, and that's helped us with our Tech Deal Club.
I'll just
much better answer.
and I'll just I don't have much to add to it, but I get where you're going with STEAM. My daughter's a design student at SCAD, and so I tell her, the creators are going to run the world. Example: the three founders of Airbnb are Rhode Island school design students. So as you know, again, it's all about relationships, right? Those collisions will create opportunities.
And so I think that last year, as or 2 years ago, as we formed the founders group, some of us expressed frustration with certain things because we couldn't find our way, right? And so I sense that it is a difficult place to be when you can't find your way because you don't know where your entry point is. So I think that's part of how this study plays out is, okay, there was that path to get from point A to point B, but what if you don't even know where point A is? That's where sometimes that frustration is. Where's my first point of contact? And I think that a lot of us sense that here, at least in our ecosystem, that we didn't know where to start to find more people, not just the network, because we're talking about things outside of your natural network. But how do you even get into this ecosystem at all?
And that was our goal, really, of the funder who asked us to make this request because they acknowledged that was an issue. There were a lot of people that were disconnected, to use Aaron's words, from the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we could, we weren't able to Twitter our way into it, do press releases our way into it. Like, we actually had to go out and find and connect with entrepreneurs. And we consider ourselves, because we've had so many years of, when we were primarily tech focused, of getting a lot of people that would come through the door and they were tech focused, and then we had to like redirect them. So we had developed a specialty of knowing, if you're interested in starting a food-based business, you need to connect with this group, and then we would make a personal phone call, hey, here's an entrepreneur for you. So we have this knowledge, so now we're just able to leverage this knowledge, pull people into the ecosystem, go out and find them, pull them into the ecosystem, make sure they had a great experience when they came on board, kind of get them directed. Okay, here's like some milestones that you need to achieve to, here's some tools and resources to help you think about your value proposition, and then connect them to the right resource in the ecosystem, because we know that a lot of people you might find, here's this, here's this resource that's going to help me, and then you get there, but because you're not necessarily a good fit for their program, it's a bad experience. So that's what our goal is to be that connection point, to make sure people are getting a good experience and they're getting the right experience for them at the right time.
And so Gloria just reminded me of something. I just referred her, a friend of mine was working with a relative who had this rapidly growing healthcare related business. And he asked for my input, what do you think? We're trying to expand in the Cleveland area. It's growing fast. They don't have the expertise. I said, I don't know what to tell you, but I tell you what, I'm going to connect you to Gloria Ware at Jumpstart, and she can probably direct you. So just a great example of, right? And so she calls me the next day after they have a meeting and said, wow, thank you for sending them. This was a great fit for what we want to do, kind of the next phase. So good to hear that went well.
Thank you.
See, relationships at work.
This is gonna, let's see, how many people do you have questions? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. So we have time for just a few more questions, but I know our speakers are gonna be staying after. Thank you, that's my timer. But I just want to let you know, I sense plenty of times frustration when you can't find your way. There are 2 places that you can find that before we get into this. It's startupcincy.com. Start there. Find out, what our ecosystem looks like. Find out what opportunities there are out there. So startupcincy.com. If you don't find it there, that's okay. My email address is Candice, CANDICE, at hill7.com, HILL7.com. Okay? So send me an email. Bjorn's the same thing, Bjorn at startupcincy.com. So we will help you find your way and navigate. So go ahead with your.
Please repeat that one time, your email.
Candice, CANDICE, at hill7, and I'd like to start already Sorry.
So I'm a foundation, a 501c3, and we do like a lot of different things. And what I'm trying to do with my team is just to pull it all together. And this is my first time here. I think this is awesome. But with 501c3s that I'm talking about right now, how is the help there for like Startup Cincy or the water company? That's something that's available here as well.
I'm going to actually pull Bjorn up for a second. Bjorn, come on up for a second. So Bjorn is our community catalyst, and he's the person who's connecting organizations throughout the entire ecosystem into Startup Cincy. So he's going to tell you a little bit about his role and how he can help connect you to what's going on here.
So can you repeat the question? Yes.
Okay, so I'm with Lucy Collins Foundation.
Nice.
We work with dental care, we work with instruments, we work with girls. And I am just struggling a bit to pull it all together to let folks know what we do, and we need help.
So you're the exact reason why we had this conversation tonight, because we really want to welcome people from various communities into one community space. So there's a lot going on around entrepreneurship, around innovation, and around tech. And so we really want to expand that. kind of the acronym that I use for tech now is techies, engineers, creatives, and hustlers. And so that's how I kind of break it down. Because those are the people that really make up tech in today's society. And so we're in the early stages, but I'm glad you're here tonight because I would love to work with you to figure out how we can work with some of the other organizations to figure out how we really get to create a community more involved in the tech scene. And also Elements is a great organization which is kind of building a pipeline for the youth into the creative arts as well as our partner PowerWorks and Arts. So I hope that answers your question.
You did. Two more questions because it's 8 o'clock and we'd like to be on time. Brandon?
How's it going? So this question is actually from my sister. She's a second year at UC, and her question is, she thinks there's so much technology in education that oftentimes she finds that it makes it harder for her to make meaningful relationships and actually connect with people because we're oftentimes just spending so much time connecting with and managing technology. So she just wants to know what ways do you all, whether this is like LinkedIn, sending meetings through there, or into Facebook, social media, what ways do you all use technology to actually get to those relationships? That was great.
Now, let's let Mitchell go, because he's, I want to hear from you first. And then we'll move on.
Yeah, no.
I know.
Make it
You
brilliant.
thought about it.
No
You thought
pressure.
I did think about
No
it.
pressure.
Never being asked to moderate again.
That's a really interesting question because there is so much technology out there. And I honestly get flustered with it just because there's so many group me messages coming through daily, text messages coming through. You got Facebook messages, LinkedIn messages, all these different types of people trying to get to you through literally your phone and your cellular device. So, and the way that I find myself building the best relationships is literally like sitting here talking to a person one-on-one. Or giving them a call on the phone, which is kind of use of technology, but I think it's still more interpersonal than a LinkedIn or Facebook message or something like that. But I really think we can use that technology of communication just kind of as that start off point, so that jump point to get and build that connection, that initial connection. So using LinkedIn to connect with someone across the nation to say, hey, this is who I am, this is what kind of questions I have in regard to startups or what type of business you do. Can we get on the phone? Can we use technology to have face-to-face Skype or even FaceTime or something like that? So kind of using that technology as more of a jump starter than an actual way to communicate. I'm trying to distance myself personally from using group meetings and things like that to really communicate to individuals because I just personally don't think it's the most effective way to communicate or get business done.
So I actually think LinkedIn, for your question, is the best tool because not only does it give you access to a network, but it gives you access to your network's network. And so if there's something that you're pursuing that's specific, you can easily put it in and see names of people if you don't know the names, or if you know a name, you just don't know how to get in touch with them. You can actually see who in your network knows them in 1 or 2 degrees of separation. Quick story, I used to live in the West End, and there's a theater, Alderson Theater in the West End that I wanted to renovate at one point. We thought it'd be a great idea if it was a Magic Johnson theater. And so I looked on LinkedIn, found people from the Magic Johnson, from his company, and realized that someone that I went to school with was actually the cousin of his executive director. So I was able to get their information, get them on the phone, and found out very early that it was a terrible idea. But there was the learning of that is I didn't waste a whole bunch of time and money in thinking that it could happen, right? So, but I think LinkedIn is the best start point, not necessarily to do like the in-mails, but to figure out who you know. And then again, it goes back to the power of the vouch, because if you know someone to have a relationship with them, then they can facilitate that introduction so that it's a much warmer.
Oh my gosh, Carl, the vouch keeps coming back. I like that. All right, one last question.
Yeah. Do you have any workshops on how to apply for SBIR grants? I have a biotech startup, and I'm just applying for National Science Foundation, HHMI grants. I don't like someone who's already been through that process and applying for it, give me tips on how to do that application.
We are going to get with Bjorn before you leave. And also Gloria, because she absolutely
Yeah, we just actually had an access to capital workshop with, NASA regarding their SBIR and Ohio Aeronautical Institute, which covers the entire state, and they're specifically looking for more women, veterans, and minorities to apply for SBIR.
So Gloria's out there winning. Thank you very much. That was great. I didn't expect any of that.
I've heard of this.
I mean, I've heard that too. That other stuff, I have not heard of, but Gloria's here. And Gloria's on LinkedIn too. Gloria's
I love LinkedIn, yes.
Sending news every week. All right, guys, well, thank you so much to my panel. We've got one last little bit from Bjorn, but thank you very much for coming this evening. And with that, we've got Bjorn. Come on, Sam.
All right, everybody. I just want to give a round of applause to all our panelists that came out tonight, and you all that stayed through us in perfection. I hope you learned a lot. So, in the interest of everybody's time, again, I really appreciate you guys for your patience tonight. I am the community manager, community catalyst of Cincinnati. So this whole effort was to really reach out to a group of people that we had not connected with, invite you into this space so you help you understand what this tech-based economy is. That's really producing a renaissance here in Cincinnati, and invite you to be a part of that. So again, you can visit us at www.startupcincy.com, one word. Make always feel comfortable using the hashtag StartupCincy. We track that like that. So again, thank y'all for coming out. Thank you to my families, and have a good night.
Oh, wow. We're going to take a picture. Oh, great. Pretty small go together.
Okay. Yeah, I'll email you.
Trace on. Would you email that to me? There it is. Where did he came? Ready? Can you get us this over? Act like we love each other. We know the picture. It ain't good if they close.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to give you my guys. So there are startups in the Mardi Gras. Thank you. Mardi Gras. Yes.